The crash in the snow. The sky was white. The ground was white. Everything around Commander Blake was frozen and silent. His ship, what was left of it, lay in pieces, half buried in the ice. Smoke rose from the wreckage, disappearing into the storm above. He tried to move. Pain shot through his side. "System, check," he whispered. His helmet's AI flickered. "Oxygen, 34%. Suit damage, moderate. No signal." Blake looked up at the sky. The stars were gone. All he saw was snow and death. He was alone on an unknown ice planet. No backup. No rescue. He tried the comms again. Static. "Base. Anyone? This is Commander Blake. My ship is down. I need immediate evac. Repeat, I need." Nothing. The cold wind answered. Minutes turned into hours. Blake dragged himself into a small crevice beside a chunk of the engine. He pulled a thermal blanket from his emergency pack and wrapped it around his shaking body. He couldn't feel his hands anymore. His visor was fogging. He checked the location logs. No planet ID. This wasn't on any known map. The mission was supposed to be a quick recon, a flyby through a dead system. No life detected, but something shot them down. And now his crew was gone. He was the only one left. The watcher in the snow. The storm calmed for just a moment. Blake forced himself to crawl out of his shelter. He needed to move. If he stayed still, he'd freeze to death. As he stood, weak and dizzy, his eyes caught movement in the distance. He blinked. A dark shape. It was tall, lean, humanoid, but not human. Blake's heart pounded. He reached for his sidearm. The figure didn't come closer. It stood still, watching. Snow blew around it, but it didn't move. It didn't flinch. Blake raised his weapon. "Identify yourself," he shouted. No response. The wind howled, and the figure turned and slowly walked away. A risky decision. Blake hesitated. Was it real, or just a hallucination? Either way, he had no choice. He limped forward, following the footprints in the snow. Each step was harder than the last. His legs were numb. His fingers felt like ice. But the prints were real. Deep, heavy, leading toward the cliffs. Just as he was about to collapse, he saw it, an opening in the rocks. A narrow cave, warm air flowing from inside. And standing at the entrance, the figure. The first encounter. Blake raised his weapon again, his hand shaking. "Stop. Stay where you are." The figure lifted one hand, slowly, carefully. It took a step back, then turned and walked into the cave. Not aggressive, not afraid. It wanted him to follow. Blake's instincts screamed no. But the cold would kill him faster than any alien could. He lowered his weapon and followed. Shelter from the storm. Inside, the cave was deeper than he expected. The walls glowed faintly blue with some kind of mineral. There was fire, real fire, set in a stone pit, and next to it, the alien. It sat on the ground, armor damaged and worn. Its skin was dark gray with faint glowing lines like veins. Its eyes, sharp, intelligent, and cautious, watched him closely. Blake didn't move. The alien gestured toward the fire. Blake hesitated, then slowly sat across from it. The warmth hit him instantly. He nearly cried. They sat in silence. Two strangers, two enemies. But neither of them moved. Neither attacked. Because they both understood one thing. Survival. The ice world's secret. As Blake warmed up, he looked around. This wasn't a random cave. There were markings on the walls. Gear, remains of old machines. The alien had been here a long time. Blake looked at it. "You live here." The alien didn't respond, but it reached into a pouch and pulled out a small container. It slid it across the floor. Dried meat, Alien rations. Blake stared at it. He hadn't eaten in 12 hours. He picked up the food slowly and nodded. Thanks. The alien gave a small nod back. Still silent. Still cautious. But for now, they had a truce. The ending look. Outside, the storm picked up again. Winds howled through the canyon. But inside, the fire burned. 2 survivors. 2 different worlds. 1 frozen planet. And something else. Deep beneath the ice. Something was waking up. The enemy with a fire. The fire crackled softly in the cave. Commander Blake sat close, arms wrapped around his body, trying to stop his hands from shaking. Across from him, the alien sat silently, eyes glowing faintly in the dark. Neither of them spoke. They didn't need to. The silence was thick. The enemy or a survivor? Blake stared at the alien. He had fought many species in his time. Most were cold, violent, trained to kill. This one, it was different. It hadn't attacked. It had shared fire, shared food. And now it was watching him. Not like a soldier watches an enemy, but like a survivor watches someone who doesn't understand the rules of this place. Blake makes a move. Slowly, Blake reached into his jacket. The alien tensed. Blake paused, then pulled out a small photo, a picture of his crew. Smiling, laughing, all gone now. He held it up. The alien leaned forward, staring. No words, but something softened in its expression. Blake pointed at the photo. Friends. The alien blinked. Then, it reached to the floor and drew something in the ice. A symbol. A small circle. 2 dots inside. A child's face. Blake understood. Family. The alien had lost people too. The bond grows. Hours passed. The storm outside got worse. Inside the cave, the fire grew low. Blake stood and looked toward the back of the cave, where old gear was piled. He found pieces of metal, old wires, even part of a broken battery cell. He brought them to the fire and sat down. The alien tilted its head. Curious. Blake smiled faintly. Let's see if I can fix something. He began to piece things together. Small tools, wiring from his damaged suit. The alien watched silently, then stood and added something of its own. A blue crystal, pulsing with low energy. Together, they built a heat coil. Small, weak, but strong enough to survive the night. The beast in the dark. Just as Blake relaxed, a deep sound echoed from the ice beyond the cave. A low, guttural growl. Blake froze. The alien rose quickly and reached for its weapon, a curved blade made of bone and metal. They weren't alone. Something was out there. Something that didn't care about peace or fire. Something hungry. The attack. Snow exploded at the entrance as a large beast, 4-legged, armored in frost and bone, charged into the cave. Its mouth opened, showing rows of sharp, black teeth. Blake fired his sidearm. 2 quick shots. The beast barely flinched. It lunged. The alien moved first, slashing across the creature's side with its blade. Blake rolled to the right, avoiding a claw that smashed into the cave wall. They moved like a team, without speaking. Blake drew the beast's attention. The alien struck from behind. Finally, the creature screeched and collapsed, dead at their feet. Both Blake and the alien stood there, breathing hard. Blood on the snow. Silence returned, understanding without words. The alien looked at Blake. Blake nodded. They had just fought together. Not as enemies. As survivors. The alien reached forward and tapped Blake's chest lightly, then its own. Then it pointed to the cave. Together. Blake understood. He reached out and shook the alien's hand. Rough, strong, but not cold. The storm ends, but trouble begins. The next morning, the storm passed. The sky cleared. But far in the distance, Blake saw something in the snow. Black smoke. Another ship. He turned to the alien and pointed. It nodded once. They packed their gear. 2 survivors. 1 path. But something was watching from the cliffs above. Eyes glowing blue. The same as the beast. But smarter. And far more dangerous. 2 worlds, 1 goal. The frozen wind howled again. But this time, Blake didn't feel the cold. He walked side by side with the alien. Threx. That's the name he had started using for the creature that had once been his enemy. Now Threx was the only reason he was alive. They moved carefully through the icy valley, following the trail of black smoke rising in the distance. 2 survivors, no words. Blake glanced at Threx. Their languages were different. Their bodies were different. Even their planets were different. But survival, that was the same. Blake's boots crunched over the snow. Threx's feet moved almost silently. They communicated with gestures, small nods, and the understanding of warriors who had seen too much death. The signal tower. By noon, they'd reached the crash site. It wasn't a ship. It was a signal tower, buried in the ice, half destroyed, but still blinking weakly. Blake's heart jumped. If I can repair this, maybe I can call for help, he whispered. Threx stepped forward, brushing snow off a control panel. They both crouched near the console. Blake began to work. Threx handed him tools, alien ones, but effective. Together, they moved like a team, a shared past. While working, Blake noticed strange markings etched into the tower walls. They weren't human. They weren't Threx's either. They were older, deeper. Have you seen these before? Blake asked. Threx didn't answer with words. He simply looked down and pressed his clawed hand against the wall, then pointed to the sky. Blake understood. These markings belonged to something bigger, something that had been here long before humans or Threx's people, something still watching. Blake's story. As the sun dipped, Blake and Threx sat by a small fire. For the first time, Blake opened up. He showed a burned patch on his uniform, his squad symbol. I was leading 5 people, he said quietly. Good people. They're gone now. Threx was silent. Then slowly he placed a small metal tag in Blake's hand. It was a child's pendant. Blake understood. They had both lost everything. That night, neither of them spoke again. But the silence between them felt less empty. A plan is born. The next morning, Blake finished repairing the signal relay. I can send a burst signal, he said, but it'll only reach orbit. We'll need to boost it from a high point. Threx pointed to the towering ridge above them, a sharp peak of ice and stone. Up there? Blake asked. Threx nodded. It was dangerous, steep, icy, and probably full of things that wanted them dead. Blake smirked. Let's do it. The climb begins. With makeshift climbing gear, Blake using a harness of old cords and Threx using natural claws. They began the climb. Ice cracked under their weight. Winds roared like screams. One wrong move could send them falling to their deaths. But they moved together, carefully, quietly, like they'd done this their whole lives. Halfway up, Blake slipped. He fell. But Threx grabbed his hand, gripping tight. They locked eyes. Blake nodded once. No words, just trust. Eyes in the snow. As they neared the top, they found something unexpected. Tracks. Fresh, large, deep. Not animal, not human, and not Threx. Blake crouched down. We're not the first ones up here. Threx scanned the area, his claws ready. From the ridge, they saw more. Strange black pods buried in the snow, glowing faintly. The markings matched those on the tower. Blake felt a chill that had nothing to do with the wind. We need to warn someone, he whispered. Threx nodded. For the first time, they had the same goal. Not just survival, but a mission. Warn their worlds. Together. But it's already too late. As Blake activated the signal uplink, the ground rumbled. From the ice below, something massive stirred. One of the black pods cracked open, not from age, but from inside. A long, bone-white claw emerged. Threx hissed. Blake's eyes widened. The message was sent. But now, they weren't just survivors. They were witnesses, and whatever had slept beneath the ice for centuries was now awake. The ice storm and the truth. The signal had been sent. But as Blake stepped back from the frozen uplink device, the mountain shook. Below them, the black pod cracked wide open, steam and ice hissing from its core. And from inside, something began to crawl out. Something older than war. Blake froze. His breath caught in his throat. The creature that emerged was twisted and ancient, with limbs that didn't move like anything he'd ever seen. Bone-white armor, dark blue veins glowing underneath its skin, and a single vertical eye on its face, pulsing like a dying star. It didn't roar. It didn't growl. It just looked at them. And somehow, Blake felt it, inside his mind. A cold whisper. You were never meant to wake us. Run or freeze. Threx grabbed Blake's arm and yanked him away from the edge of the ridge. Go, Blake shouted, heart hammering. The storm above began to churn again, as if the creature's presence was changing the sky itself. They ran, sliding down icy slopes, dodging falling rocks, the wind screaming louder than ever. Behind them, the creature climbed the ridge, not fast, but steady, like it knew it had already won. Shelter lost. They made it back to the cave by nightfall. But something was wrong. The fire was gone. The walls were cracked. The place felt wrong now, cold in a way it hadn't been before, like something had touched it, corrupted it. Blake collapsed onto a rock, breathing hard. Okay, what the hell was that thing? Threx knelt, using his claw to draw a symbol in the dirt floor. It looked like a sun with claws wrapped around it. Blake frowned. What is that? Threx tapped his chest, then Blake's. Then the drawing. And then slashed through it. The message. Blake sat up, slowly understanding. That thing. It's not from your people, not from mine. Threx nodded. Blake added, it's older, deadlier, and it wants both of us gone. They both looked at the broken uplink device. It had sent the signal, but was it enough? And would anyone believe it? The ice storm arrives. That night, the temperature dropped even more. A blizzard rolled in like a wave of knives. They used scraps from the crash, metal sheets and broken panels to block the cave entrance. Inside, the fire barely stayed lit. Blake sat close to Threx. They were wrapped in whatever warmth they had. Silence again, but not empty silence. It was the silence between soldiers before a final fight. Blake looked up. I thought I knew who the enemy was, he said quietly. But maybe we were just pawns. Threx didn't speak, but he reached over and handed Blake something. A data crystal. Blake turned it over. What is this? Threx pointed to the small projector built into Blake's wrist tool. Blake activated it. The truth. A small hologram lit up. It showed a battlefield, but not human, not Draken. It was older. Massive creatures, just like the one from the pod, destroying cities, killing both human-looking and Draken-looking beings. The footage shifted. An alliance. Humans and Draken, together, fighting this ancient enemy. And then a final image. A planet buried in snow, and a warning in broken code. Do not awaken them. Keep the ice sealed. Blake's chest went cold. This planet wasn't just dangerous. It was a prison. A terrible realization. Blake looked at Threx, voice low. We didn't crash here by accident. Threx's eyes narrowed. He nodded slowly. They wanted us to find this. Wanted to see if the prison still held. Blake stood, fists clenched. We're the test. The ice begins to crack. The next morning, the storm was still raging, but the ice beneath their feet rumbled. They stepped outside. In the distance, more black pods had surfaced. Some were still closed. Some were not. Blake grabbed his gear. We have to get off this planet. Threx stood beside him, blade in hand. Blake turned to him. Not as enemies, not as soldiers. Threx nodded. Survivors, he said in deep, broken English. Blake smiled. Let's stay that way. The signal and the sacrifice. The black pods in the distance had started to glow. Not bright, not fast, but slow, steady, like heartbeats beneath the ice. Commander Blake and Threx watched from the high ridge, their breath fogging in the freezing air. They're waking up, Blake said quietly. Threx didn't answer. He didn't need to. He had seen this before, long ago. And back then, no one survived. The final beacon. Back at the broken signal tower, Blake worked fast. He had one last tool, a deep core booster, taken from his emergency pack. If he connected it to the uplink, it would send a burst signal beyond orbit, straight to Earth command. But it wasn't made for long range. Once activated, it would burn itself out. Worse, someone had to stay behind to hold the power core steady. Blake's hands paused. It was a one-way job. A wordless decision. He turned to Threx. We get this message out. Maybe Earth has a chance. Threx studied him in silence. Then, slowly, he stepped forward and reached for the power core. Blake's eyes widened. No, you've done enough. Let me do it. Threx shook his head. Then, in low, broken English, he said, You, go home. Blake clenched his fists. We both go. But Threx just smiled faintly, a warrior's smile. No home, for me. The final countdown. Blake started the timer. 2 minutes. The signal would charge and launch into deep space. They stood side by side, overlooking the ice. The pods below were opening now, one by one. Monsters crawling out, stretching, sniffing the air. The ancient enemy was no longer sleeping. Blake turned to Threx. You know they'll come for you first. Threx looked down at his blade, then to the rising sun. Let them. The goodbye time was almost up. Blake stepped forward, heart heavy. Listen, you didn't just save my life. You gave me a reason to fight again. Threx placed a clawed hand on Blake's shoulder. Fight for both. Blake nodded once, and then he ran, through the snow, down the ridge, toward the extraction point the message had marked. Behind him, the tower lit up, blue and gold energy rising into the sky, and at its center, Threx stood tall, alone, unmoving, a soldier to the end. The sacrifice. The signal launched. A streak of light cut through the atmosphere. The creatures saw it and turned. Dozens of them. Hundreds. They climbed the ridge, charging toward the signal. Toward Threx. He didn't run. He raised his blade and screamed. It was not a scream of fear. It was a battle cry. A cry of honor. The escape. Blake reached the crash zone of a fallen satellite. Inside was an emergency pod, barely functional. He jumped in and activated the tracker. Overhead, the beacon flashed again. The AI confirmed. Signal received. Extraction ship en route. Blake collapsed into the seat, shaking. Not from cold. From the weight of what had just happened. The message reaches Earth. Days later. In a high command room on Earth, generals gathered around a blinking console. A voice played through the static. Unknown alien species waking beneath ice. World is a prison, not a planet. Warning. Repeated. Warning. Then, an image appeared. A blurry photo of Threx, standing tall in front of a glowing alien army. And in his hand, the same pendant he once gave Blake. Silence filled the room. Then a voice said, "Send a fleet, prepare for war, and find that human. Rescue from the sky." The ice winds howled across the silent planet. Ash and snow danced in the air, mixing like falling ghosts. The once hidden prison was now wide open, and monsters roamed free. But in the sky above, something had changed. Human ships were coming. Earth answers the signal. In Earth's orbit, a strike fleet of 3 cruisers and 10 fighter wings dropped out of hyperspace. Their lead ship, the ESS Valiant, scanned the icy world below. Commander Mara Lynn stood on the bridge, her voice cold and focused. "Scan for life signs. Prioritize human." "Ma'am," a tech officer said, "we've got something. Faint, human signature near crash sector 7. And," he paused, "there's something else. Big, moving fast." Mara narrowed her eyes. "Drop a recovery team and prep all weapons. Because Earth wasn't just here to rescue. Earth was here to fight." Blake's cold awakening. Commander Blake opened his eyes slowly. Pain, ice, burning light from the emergency pod window. Then, a shadow outside. He grabbed his sidearm, weak, barely able to lift it. The pod hissed open. Boots thudded in the snow. "Blake," a human voice. Blake blinked through the light and saw a soldier's face, young, surprised, human. "You're alive." A hero returns. Back on the Valiant, Blake stood wrapped in thermal blankets. His voice was hoarse, but his message was clear. "I need to speak to command. Now." The Admiral stepped forward. "Son, you're lucky to be alive. We got your signal. You did good." Blake shook his head. "I didn't do it alone." He held up the data crystal Threx had given him. "There's more down there, and we're not ready." The truth hits Earth. The crystal showed everything. The ancient war. The alliance between human and Draken. The creatures beneath the ice. The sacrifice of Threx. Silence followed. No one spoke. Finally, Commander Mara Lynn leaned forward. "So you're telling me this planet is a weapon?" Blake nodded. "And it's been unlocked. But Threx isn't gone." Just as Blake was being led to medical, an alert sounded. "Ma'am, we're detecting movement near the original signal tower. It's alive. Faint, but there." Blake froze. "It's him." Mara frowned. "You mean the alien?" Blake turned to her. "His name is Threx. And if he's alive, we go back. Now." The return to ice. A dropship launched back toward the planet's surface. Inside, Blake, a small rescue unit, and 2 medical bots. They followed the beacon deep into the storm again. Blake stood in the open hatch as they descended. The world was burning ice now. Alien beasts were crawling across the landscape. Some watched. Most ignored. But something was different. They weren't moving toward the humans. They were circling something else. The warrior in the snow. They found him. Threx. Half buried in snow. Bleeding. Frozen. But alive. Around him were the remains of 4 monsters, cut down by blade and claw. He had held the line. Blake jumped down and ran to him. "Threx." The alien opened one eye, barely breathing. Blake dropped to his knees. "You're not done yet, warrior." Threx gave the faintest grin. "Still, here." A promise made. Back aboard the Valiant, Threx was placed into a specialized medbay. His body was healing. Slowly. But his presence was bigger than survival. He was proof that humans and Draken could stand together. Blake stood outside the glass chamber. A young soldier approached. "Sir, what do we do now?" Blake looked at the stars beyond the viewport. "We do what Threx did. We fight for more than just survival. We fight for the future, not just a survivor." The sky over Earth was clear. No ice, no monsters, just blue sky and a new beginning. Commander Blake stood at the edge of the landing platform, watching the shuttle descend from orbit. Inside it, resting in a reinforced chamber, was the one being no one expected to see again. Threx, the alien who had once been a silent enemy, was now the galaxy's first symbol of unity. The world watches. All across Earth, screens flickered with live footage. Soldiers, civilians, even children watched in silence as the alien stepped out of the shuttle, weakened, scared, but standing tall. Threx walked beside Blake, his pace slow but steady. The crowd didn't cheer. Not yet. They watched, careful, curious, waiting. And then, Blake raised his voice. "This warrior saved my life. Not once, not twice, but every time I thought I'd die, he stood beside me." He paused, voice stronger. "He is not our enemy. He is not just a survivor. He is the reason Earth is alive today." An unexpected gesture. In the front row, a small child stepped forward. She held something in her tiny hands, a white flower. She looked up at Threx, trembling. Everyone froze. Threx knelt slowly. The girl placed the flower in his hand. Threx looked at it, then at her, and gave the smallest nod. The crowd exhaled. And then, they applauded. Not in fear, but in hope. The Council's decision. Later, in a high-level Earth Council meeting, the decision came. Threx would be granted full protection as an ambassador. Blake would lead the first human Draken Unity mission. Together, they would return to the ice world, not to fight, but to seal what had been opened and protect what should never be touched again. The future begins. In a hangar filled with sunlight, a new ship stood ready. Its name, Unity 1. Painted on its hull were two symbols: the Earth Federation's eagle and the Draken warrior's crest. Blake stood at the ramp, helmet in hand. Threx joined him, his steps stronger now. "You ready for this?" Blake asked. Threx gave a faint smile. Together, final voiceover ending. Optional for YouTube narration. In a galaxy full of war, one human and one alien changed everything. Not with weapons, not with armies, but with trust, with fire, and with the choice to stand together when everyone else chose to be alone. The end.